Hi, Cyd. I'm really glad you could join us today.
Thanks, Sam. Good to be here with you.
Could you, before we just jump in, give us a little background on who you are and your inspiration for what you do overall, not just writing your book?
Well, I'm a longtime nutrition and health educator. I graduated from the Center of Nutrition Studies through Cornell University, and I'm a certified instructor for several dietary therapy courses under a variety of doctors. And I've worked with school districts and hospitals. So for many, many years, I've been in the nutrition field. And I'm also a longtime Christian, which is the basis of my book, how all of these principles that I've learned about healthy eating actually tied in with scripture. And that was the inspiration for the book. And it certainly didn't come from me. And that's the story I can tell if you're interested in hearing that. But I live in the Midwest with my hubby, and we like to travel around in old Volkswagens, and we watch classic movies, and we like to kayak on the river.
That sounds great, especially this time of year.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with that unusual inspiration for your book? You had column writing experience where you were sharing your nutrition knowledge, but you had never written a book before, and you went from having no experience writing a book at all to getting a complete manuscript. Can you walk us a little bit through that journey, including what it was like to suddenly be sitting down and writing a book after only writing columns?
Yeah, well, I wrote a column for our local newspaper here for 7 years. So I had a nutrition column, which required me to give them an article twice a month, just a 700 to 1,000 word article twice a month. So I was already doing that. Plus, I had created a website back in 2011, and I was writing blogs pretty regularly. But that's as far as my writing experience went. So as I mentioned, I was studying scripture for a long time and studying nutrition for a long time. And one night while I was preparing for a Bible study, which I was leading for the women's group at our local church, like every now and then I'd come across a verse and I thought, wow, that kind of correlates with nutrition. But those were fleeting thoughts. It never occurred to me to pursue that further. But one night when I was doing a Bible study, it would just like bam, what came into my mind, all of these thoughts, all of these principles and verses that correlated with healthy eating, which I had never really put much thought into, but they were flooding my mind so fast, Sam, that I was struggling to write them down. So this was not from me. I feel this was really a divine inspiration, which convinced me that I am supposed to write a book about this and list all of these correlations in a book, because I know the research on diet, I know the science behind it all, and I had also been studying scripture. So to weave those two together was going to be a task that I had never even considered before, but I knew I had my marching orders to do that. You know how sometimes you pray, oh, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? You pray for wisdom on decisions. I wasn't praying about this. This was like, bam, this is what you're going to do. So I knew that that was what I was intended to do, and I had no idea where to start. No desire to even write a book. It was never a dream of mine to write a book. And so I needed to start from scratch. And the way I did that was, the first thing I did was take all of those thoughts that I had written down and made a chapter outline. Like, okay, this chapter is going to be about this verse that says, there's a verse that says, don't conform to your culture so quickly without even thinking about it. Do not conform to the culture without even thinking about it. I thought, wow, well, that can apply to many things, but especially food, right? Because we're surrounded by unhealthy food everywhere we go. So that became the title of the chapter, Be a Nonconformist, right? Don't conform. And then there's another principle that we're going to reap what we sow. In other words, the things that we plant in our lives, the decisions that we make are going to harvest corresponding consequences at some point, right? So if we make bad choices, we can expect unfavorable outcomes. And so that became the chapter titled Plant Your Best Seeds, because it's so true when it comes to diet, right? If we sow an unhealthy diet, we can expect to reap health issues, and illness. But if we sow an optimal diet, we can expect to lessen our risk of disease. So all of these things kind of tied together. So once I had all of that laid out, and that was no small task, putting down the scriptures and the chapter titles, Then I thought, now where do I go? Because I had zero knowledge about writing a book or what to do. So I just started looking online for help, and I came across this website called janefriedman.com, and I started reading all of her blogs about writing books. She helps authors get hooked up with publishing, and she has classes on that. So that was very helpful to me. And I didn't even know what I was reading at the time, Sam. She had all these articles about publishing and writing. And she had one class called The Art of the Revision. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm going to sign up for that. So here I signed up for this class on revising your manuscript. And I hadn't even written the first chapter. So it's just an example of how naive I was. Like, I did not know what I was doing. Anything that sounded interesting, I was signing up for it. And it was through Jane's website, though, that was really helpful to me, because she talks about, are you a plotter or a pantser? So plotters are people like me that typically have to have an outline structure and what's the next step? I just need to know what's the next step I need to do. Where pantsers fly by the seat of their pants. And both of those things are kind of necessary in writing a book. You do need to have structure and organization, but there's times when you need to fly by the seat of your pants as well. But at the start of my journey, I certainly needed structure and organization because I had no idea what I was doing. So the first thing that I learned from Jane is that I needed to create a book proposal before the book was even truly written. So a book proposal, I thought, oh, wow, so to present to publishers. So I had to sign up for Jane's course on that. And it took me several months to write that 43-page document. It's an overview, of the uncompleted book. So you're writing an overview of the book when you don't even have the book, first of all. You have to research your target audience. Well, I didn't know who's my target audience. I had no idea what that was at the time. You have to list all the complementary and competing books that are out there like yours and explain why your book is similar to those or different than yours. And again, I don't even have, the idea of what the book's going to totally be about. You have to provide endorsements about yourself, and you have to give them your marketing campaign before you've even written the book. So, and then you have to submit a completed chapter with the book proposal as well. So all of that really made me put my thinking cap on early in the game, which is crucial, because otherwise, you can just flit around from thing to thing and not really have clarity on what you're doing. And I did not have clarity, that's for sure. But it was Jane's website that helped me put things in order, like I'm thinking a query letter and book proposals and editors, and I don't know where to begin. So for me, to keep my sanity, I just have to learn the next thing I need to know. That's how I keep my sanity. What's the next thing I need to learn? And then I focus on that for a few weeks or months before moving on, because I was feeling very overwhelmed.
I'm sure we've all felt the sense of overwhelm as writers, even just working on smaller pieces. I can tell you, just working on a piece for a newsletter that only has a self-imposed deadline, it can be pretty crazy. So I can only imagine diving headfirst into this with no idea what you're doing. So in addition to Jane's website, were there any other people or resources that help you really navigate this? And what would you also say to people who are in your situation, whether they wanted to write a book or they just got an inspiration but don't know what they're doing? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, for other resources, in addition to janefriedman.com, again, I did search the internet for a lot of things, but I signed up for a local writing group at my local college as well, a writers collaborative workshop type of thing, and got a lot of inspiration there from other writers. So just dive into where you can meet with other writers, especially. Or if you find, I found so much with Jane Friedman's website that I didn't veer off of that too much. I kind of stuck with her classes because I learned a lot from her. And there's just so many resources out there online that you can find help with. It's going to depend on if you're a plotter, a pantser, or, if you just need clear direction from the start, like I did. If you're thinking about writing a book, do it. It took me 5 years because I didn't know what I was doing at the start, and I dawdled for 4.5 years. I just dragged my feet and I'd write a little bit here and there. but I've learned that many people say this, the secret to writing a book is BIC. That stands for butt in chair. So a lot of times my B was not in the C. I was working part-time at Edward Jones. You know, I was a fill-in at Edward Jones, and if one of their employees quit, I was working for months on end. And I used that as my excuse. And then I was reading about other full-time employees that also write books. And, you know, I really had no excuse except that I was dragging my feet. So if you're thinking about writing a book, it's going to depend on your personality, if you're a pantser or a plotter. But if you're a plotter like me, get it organized into just what are your chapter titles going to be and go from there. You know, just write one chapter at a time, focus on it, do your research. I had no idea how to write a manuscript, how to do citations and references, you know, because the publisher that offered me a book deal, I had to submit the completed edited manuscript to them. You know, they didn't do that for me. So just kind of know if you're going to self-publish, if you're going to find a traditional publisher. Those things are all, there's pros and cons to both, but I learned a lot about that by attending a writer's conference in my area as well. So just submerge yourself into what you need to know to go forward. It's going to be different for everybody what you need to know. For me, it was where to start from zero.
So you chose to find a publisher rather than self-publishing. Was there a logic behind that, or why did you go with a traditional publisher?
Well, you know, like I said, I had drug my feet for 4.5 years. And then in January of 2018, the Lord gave me a little kick in the pants, like, okay, you know, I gave you this assignment to write the book. What are you doing? Why haven't you? I said, okay, 2018 is going to be the year of the book. I'm going to finish this book in 2018. That was the commitment I made to myself and to God. And so to do that, I quit my job at Edward Jones and I looked for a writers' conference in my area where I could go start looking for publishers, because I knew that was one way to, you know, meet a bunch of publishers at one time and actually speak to them face to face. So as it turns out, there was a Christian writers conference in my area in June of 2018, which I signed up for. And I didn't know if I was going to be choosing a traditional publisher or self-publishing. I had read the pros and cons of both, and I hadn't made a decision or even really knew what I was doing. I was just, again, Miss Naivety, going to the writers' conference with no idea what to expect. I knew that I had to research the staff that was going to be there and try to pick who I wanted to make an appointment with, because when you go to a writers' conference, you have to make an appointment with the publishers that are going to be interested in your work, publishers that you feel you'd like to speak to. And you only get a 15-minute appointment with them. So you need to choose carefully. So that means you need to research all the staff that's going to be there. So when I did that, I happened to hand my manuscript to Morgan James Publishing. They're kind of like a hybrid publisher where you do the completed manuscript and you have it edited and you maintain all the rights to your work, but they do the cover, they do the Barnes & Noble promotion, you know, they do a lot of marketing for you. So that's the hybrid publisher that made me the offer, and that's what I went with, just because I had been told never expect an offer at your first conference. You're going to get rejection after rejection after rejection. So I never expected to get an offer at the first conference. So I guess God kind of made that decision for me, because when Morgan James called me, I was at a James Taylor concert with my husband and the phone rings and I go, hello? He goes, yeah, this is Morgan James. You know, we'd like to make you an offer on that book proposal, but you've got to have it into us by December of this year. So by December of 2018, they wanted the full completed edited manuscript, which means I had now less than 6 months to write as much as I had written in the previous 4.5 years. So the pressure was on, and that's kind of what I needed to get myself in gear.
Going back to those, even having self-imposed deadlines, I know there are a lot of us who struggle to have a daily writing habit. We talk about that a lot in Foster, is like, how do we get a daily writing habit? Well, having a hard deadline seems to be a good idea. Now, that's a very interesting way that you found the publisher. And it really does sound like it was something that the Lord worked out, because you have such a niche thing. It's not a usual subject. And before you and I first connected, I had never heard of anybody really writing about both. Well, you're not just diet and health, you're also whole food plant-based, which is a niche within a dietary niche. And then you also have the spiritual niche. So you have this, I don't know, maybe we need to coin a new quote that. Maybe we need to come up with a new term like ultra niche or something. And you landed on this not only a conference that had somewhat of your audience for publishers, but also a specific publisher that wanted this kind of book. Now, once you had the manuscript done, we talked a little bit about promotion methods, you and I, beforehand. What worked best for you and what didn't work, so that we can kind of get an idea of your process for putting all of this together and then getting it out to other people? Because a lot of us here in Foster were writing things that we're publishing on our blogs, or we're publishing newsletters, and the promotional end of it is never easy for the creative types, I've found. So what worked for you, and how'd you finally get into a place where you were just kind of had a rhythm of promoting?
Well, it's taken a while, and I can't say that I'm totally there yet, Sam, because, here, by the way, here's a copy of my book. It's called The Plan A Diet, Combining Whole Food Plant-Based Nutrition with the Timeless Wisdom of Scripture. So who's my audience? Is it Christians that want to eat healthier? Or is it people already whole food plant-based that happen to be Christian? So I struggled with that from day one, because there's two separate niches there. And I still struggle with it to this day, to some degree. But I've tried all sorts of marketing things that led nowhere. And so Morgan James, my publisher, they have a 3-day event, marketing event, twice a year with a red carpet and everything. The authors get to walk down the red carpet and be interviewed for their websites, and it's all this marketing hype. And it's 3 days of what they call guerrilla marketing, with all these tips and ideas of how to market. But over time, I've learned that I don't want to market to the world. The world is not interested in this book right here. There's a real specific niche here. And so I was speaking in person at Veg Fest. I thought, what better way to promote whole food plant-based than at a Veg Fest, right? So in Florida, I spoke at 4 different Veg Fests, gave presentations. I set up book signing booths at these Veg Fests. Very little results came from that. I maybe sold 10 books out of all 4 Veg Fests. So very few people were interested in that. I sent books to influencers in my category, whole food plant-based influencers. And I did get a few podcast interviews, but not very many, because again, maybe they weren't as interested in the Christian aspect of it. I sent books to influencers in the Christian market, and they weren't interested because they don't care about a plant-based diet. So my audience is very, well, it's out there. There's a lot of people that have grown to follow me, but it's taken me time to figure out who my niche is, because not everybody is your tribe. That's one thing I had to learn the hard way. Like, if you feel like your book is being rejected, or your work is being rejected or ignored, just remind yourself that they are not your tribe, right? So we have to find our tribe. And sometimes that can be a little harder than it sounds. So you have to find your voice when you're creating a book. I found that you have to find all these things. You have to find your voice. You have to find your niche, which has taken me a while. And then you have to find your tribe. Lots of things there that can take a lot of time and a lot of experimentation. So I've tried radio interviews. There's a website out there, radioguestlist.com, where you can put yourself out to radio interviewers. And I did get on several radio shows, but did that prove helpful to me? No, nobody was ordering my book that I know of after that. And the way I can track sales is through my website, for one way. So I have tried all sorts of things, and now I'm in a course for more how to market my book my course. I've created a course around the book. I should back up a little bit, because people said you're not going to make a lot of money from the book, but if you develop a course around the book and make it a transition course for people who want to eat healthier and include some scriptural optional principles for people that are Christian, that would be the way to really see more income. And again, it wasn't the income that really appealed to me. I mean, I'm just following what God told me to do, was to write this book. And based on some of the comments that I've gotten from the book, I feel that purpose may have already been served. People that told me, this is just what I was looking for. You really helped me. You saved my life, blah, blah. So, maybe the purposes have already been filled. But I still have a basement full of books to get rid of, because the publisher does require, Morgan James does require you to buy some books up front, to have on stock. So in order to market my book, I am now working on a course around the book. And I have figured out, you need to figure out, is there a problem? Does your audience have a problem that they want to solve? And this is for me in the nonfiction category, so this wouldn't work for everyone. Is the problem big enough to where they're going to want help from you? And is your solution the answer? Can your solution help them, and why should they choose you? So you have to consider all of those things when you're creating Facebook ads or targeting people. Like right now, I just ran a whole marketing campaign on Facebook for the month of June, and I was targeting whole food plant-based eaters, and I did not get the results I thought I would. I mean, I did get some results. The free webinar invites them to a call with me, and I maybe had 12 calls, for the month, which is okay, but that's not a lot. So then I created a video ad geared toward Christians, just for the book. And that didn't prove very fruitful either. So I struggle with Facebook targeting, and I'm still working on that now to get it niched down to people that would be interested in this topic. And again, I've been given conflicting advice that if there's scripture in your book, you need to focus on a Christian audience. And other people say, no, if this helps anybody, whether or not they're a Christian, you need to focus on the general population and have the Christian part of it as an option. So yeah, I've gotten conflicting advice from 2 trusted sources on this. So sometimes I just kind of throw things against the wall to see what works. I don't like doing it that way, but oftentimes that's what I need to do.
So I'm hearing a couple of things. One, you do have to find really hyper focus where your particular topic is of interest, but also not be afraid to experiment.
Oh yeah, you can't be afraid to experiment. And if that's what it's going to take to get where you need to be, your funnel, then it's worth it. At least you know what doesn't work. I know what doesn't work now. Many times, like I've been invited to speak to Rotary groups and to weight loss clubs. I've been invited to speak to all these little community groups as well. And that does not really prove very fruitful. So right now, I just recently started a live Q&A on Facebook where I live stream, live Q&A sessions every Wednesday night. And I'm hoping that'll get some traction. I have about 4 devoted followers there. That's it. So, yeah.
So how else do you leverage the internet for your promotion? I'm asking because a lot of us here at Foster are online writers. We're not book writers yet, although I know some people are and some people are aspiring. How are you leveraging internet presence aside from Facebook?
Well, I've got a YouTube channel where I put cooking videos, and actually we'll post a chapter about the book on there once in a while. My own website too. I do a weekly newsletter, which goes out to I think I have about 2,600 people on there now, which isn't a lot, but it's far more than I had when I wrote the book. I had very little social media presence when I approached my publisher. And I knew that was one thing they were looking at, and I didn't have that at the time. So in addition to the newsletter, the live Q&As on Wednesday nights, the YouTube videos, and the Facebook, I have a private Facebook group and a Facebook page as well. So that's about all I can handle and manage, in addition to working on the course and dealing with the calls that people schedule with me.
I was going to ask next, how long are you spending on all of this online presence and content creation on average, I'd say like in a week?
Maybe 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours to develop all of that, you know, like for the Q&A tomorrow night, they want to know about how to evaluate what you hear and read, you know, because there's so many conflicting things out there about diet. How do we know which science we should believe? So I'm working on that right now. That'll be tomorrow's Q&A. Blog posts too. Sometimes I just do the simple thing and post a recipe I've just tried. Other times I'll do a big article on heart disease, which I did last week because a relative of mine just had a heart attack, and I thought I'm going to do an article about that this week. So I would say about 6 hours total right now, which doesn't seem like a lot. That's at the computer. My mind is thinking about it much more than the 6 hours. So, yeah.
And do you still connect with other writers to support you on your continued journey? Because that's what we do here at Foster. When you said you found the writers conference and you were suggesting connecting with other writers, I'm thinking, gee, I wonder where we can do that. Is that still on your radar?
Sort of, yeah. The Morgan James Publishing has its own Facebook page, you know, and I've trickled off of there as time has gone on, but I do stay friends with one of the co-authors that I met during my process, because she was in the same stage of the editing and processing journey as I was. So we kind of went through Morgan James together. So I stay in touch with her. But as far as like looking at Jane Friedman's things anymore, I really haven't. Although my big dream is I would love to get back into magazine and newspaper articles again. That's what started this whole thing. And I think God was preparing me. Although for 7 years, I wrote that newspaper column. And I think God was using that to prepare me to write the book in some ways. So I would love to get back to that. And as soon as I get my course marketed and out there running smooth, I'm going to focus more time on that.
Could we back up and just talk about that a little bit? A lot of us are newsletter writers, and I don't know how many people are looking to write for publications, but how did you actually get into doing the columns, and how would you say it prepared you to be a book author, particularly because you didn't have any book writing experience?
Well, I was our local newspaper. I approached them and said, hey, I'd like to do a column based on recipes and nutrition and health. Would you be interested? And they said, yes, they would. What will it be like? And I said, it can be either a Q&A format where people submit questions, or I can just present a topic of interest, like why flaxseed is so good for us, for example, you know, so articles like that. And they allowed that to go on for 7 years until they decided that the bartender column would probably be of more interest to local people. So I got the boot and the bartender guy came in. But no, I feel like that was definitely a God ordained opportunity for me to start writing articles and be thinking about 700 to 1,000 words and the structure of that, you know, the beginning of the article, the main thing, and the follow-up, you know, thinking about all those things about an article. So from there, there's an online magazine called Cape Magazine. Sometimes we go to Cape Coral, Florida, and there's a magazine down there that was letting me put articles on their online magazine as well. So I would approach them, although lately I haven't been doing that because I'm focused on other things. But that's my goal again, is to start. But I know when you approach a magazine or a newspaper of any substance, you need to have a query letter. You know, you need to have a lot of the same things that you would send to a publisher, really. You know, you have to sell yourself with the article that you've got in mind, the query letter, who are you, you know, your bio, all these things.
I'm having a laugh over the bartender thing, because all I was thinking was, geez, talk about finding your niche, and then then having somebody define it for you. It's like, well, you were a good niche for a while, and that comes, I think, to another important point, is that as we're on our writing journeys, like you talked about yours, there's going to be these bumps in the road. It's not just going to be, I'm going to go on this trajectory and take off like a rocket ship. It's ups and downs. Particularly, you mentioned when we were talking before how you spent 4.5 years writing, like, what was it, half your book, and then you had to write the other half in 6 months. It's not always a clear trajectory. Yeah.
It certainly is not. In the book, they wanted it to be about 80,000 words. That's the typical length for a book. And then I discovered, first I was freaking out that I'm never going to get 80,000 words. By the time I was done, I had way too many words than 80,000. So I had to really condense it back, to what was the important message here. So yeah, there's never a straight line. For me, there wasn't. I mean, I was all over the map. I'm still all over the map, I feel like. I don't, I'm pursuing a marketing course right now. I'm in a marketing class on how to market the course around my book. So I'm all over the place. And, I just pray that I'm still in line with what I'm supposed to be doing. And I ask God to show me that. If I'm off base, stop me right now, because I'm doing what I think I need to do, but I'm not hearing this from the Lord. These are things that I think are necessary. And so that can be a hard thing too, to get out of your own way sometimes and figure out the best way to go.
It's particularly tempting when there are so many avenues out there, especially on the internet. Can I back up just for a second? What was the editing process like when you found that you had too many words? I'm sure that's a common thing among us writers.
Right. Well, the editing process, you're not talking about my editor per se, right? You're talking about me having to wind the book down.
A little bit of both, because we do editing too in Foster. We help each other edit. We have editors. So what was it like for you both to work with an editor and then you having to do that trimming and take those suggestions?
Well, working with an editor was a challenge because, again, I didn't know who to choose for that. There's so many people out there. The Morgan James Publishing gave me a list of 3 or 4 editors, plus I researched a few online. And there's many that go to the Christian Writers Conferences as well. But my concern was, I know that editors are very unbiased, or they should be if they're professional. But I felt if somebody had a bias against a spiritual-based book or against plant-based eating, that they might not look at my book, open-mindedly as a reader would. So I had a concern about that. So when I hired my editor, after I interviewed 3 editors in depth and chose the one I felt was the best fit. And then when there were deadlines involved, because remember, I had to get this to my publisher by December, and it was already June. It was July when the publisher made me the offer. So I had like 3 months to get a book to the editor so she'd have time to edit it. And I found out that she had farmed my manuscript out to someone else, which I did not like that, Sam. I had interviewed her to do the editing, and she farmed it out to someone else that I didn't even know was editing my book. And it turns out that person had a whole different idea about nutrition and was challenging everything in my manuscript. So that was not a good experience for me, but I've learned a lot there to always interview your editors really well. So when I knew I had to trim the book down, the first place I started was the 21-day meal plan, right? That's an easy place to chop down to 7 days. So when I took that 21-day meal plan down to a 7-day meal plan, that wiped out thousands of words right there, because all the recipes were in there as well. And then I just went back through each chapter and I asked myself, is this really necessary to what I'm saying here? And if it wasn't, I just axed it out. And I think I still came in at like 82 or 83,000 words, and they said that was okay. So, but this is like a 6x9 book, and the size does matter because of the price, that they're going to put on your book. And if it's lengthy, it has to be a higher price, and even the book has to be smaller or bigger. So it's not just that they want that 80,000 words for no reason. There's reasons behind that. I didn't know any of that either.
So those are considerations you have to make specifically when you're writing a book, because when you're writing online, size isn't an issue.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not. Yeah.
Well, it depends. The ideal length of content changes every year, but that's interesting too. I didn't know that about the book publishing. This just a few extra 1,000 words can change the whole game.
Yeah, right. So again, for me, it was just one step at a time. What do I need to know next? First it was the book proposal. Then what do I need to do? Well, I need to create the book. So I just went step by step without trying to feel too overwhelmed. And I was blessed in so many ways, Sam, because not only did I find a publisher at my first writers conference, which I'm told is not very usual at all, But I received endorsements from doctors that I don't even know, like Hans Deal. He's the doctor in charge of the whole CHIP program, which is a big deal. He wrote the foreword for my book. You know, he doesn't even know me, but because a friend of mine knows him, he agreed to write the foreword for my book. And then I received endorsements from other people that graciously agreed to endorse the book. Dr. Lim, you know, he's with the Dr. McDougall program, so he's very recognizable. And then just the ability to complete that book in those 3 or 4 months, that in itself was a miracle because I really needed to focus, and that's just what I needed to do. That was that deadline. So was the deadline stressful? Yes, it was, especially when my editor wasn't meeting her commitments. That's when it got really stressful for me. But in a way, it's just exactly what I needed to get it finished.
All right, I'll give you one more, and then I'll see if people have questions. So in addition to the deadline, what else did you do to help yourself focus in those last few months? Because we talked about it being 6 months for you to finish the book, but like you just said, since it had to be edited, you actually had 3. What were your kind of focus tips that maybe you could share?
Well, I had to do away with the distractions for one. Well, number one, BIC, right, butt in chair. That was number one. So many more hours of the B being in the C. And then I had to really discipline myself about distractions, you know, not be turning on the TV because that favorite thing is on. You know, I was really focused on the book for the majority of the day. I would spend whole days on the book, and then I'd give myself a break because I knew I was going to burn out if I didn't have structured break times in there as well. So yeah, do away with your personal distractions. And you know, it's hard for me when I'm under a deadline or stress, my head's in the refrigerator a lot. So, you know, I had to figure that out too right away. Like I cannot do my work in the kitchen. That's like setting me up for a really bad. So I never try to write while I'm in the kitchen because the food is right here. And if I'm stressy, you know, I'm a stress eater. So I will just be trying to munch away while I think. Or if I'm trying to delay a problem, that's another time when I'm a stress eater. So did I try to delay the book? Well, I did that for 4.5 years. And then when I knew I had to complete it, again, it had to be divine intervention at some points, because I look back at the book now, Sam, and I read it and I thought, where did I come up with that? Sometimes I don't even recognize what I wrote, and that's unusual. Although the book has been out, it released in 2019 in the fall, even though it has 2020 in the copyright, because after September, I guess the copyright goes to the next year, which I didn't know.
So I'm hearing identify your distractions, identify the ways that you procrastinate, and eliminate them at all costs.
Yeah, so if it meant canceling lunch with friends, I did that. You know, if it meant not going on a joyride once in a while because I was focused. Like when I was writing, if I would get in the groove, I did not want to stop. Once you get in a groove, don't stop unless you absolutely have to. So when I was in those groove moments, nothing else would get in the way.
So letting the flow happen and just kind of rolling with it, literally.
Yeah, but I learned some good tips when I was taking that class at the college about writing. It said if you're staring at a blank page, then your critical judge, your editor, is in the room. So we have a creative side, and then we have the editor side of us. And I had to learn not to be both of those at the same time, because that slows me down. That was slowing me down. So I took the class at the college, and he taught us how to free write. That's just to be the creator. Even if things don't make sense, just type it away. And he would give us a topic, pick a topic, and you have 2 minutes to write about it, and you cannot think. You just have to continually write and not stop. You cannot think about it. So that was a great exercise to get the creator going. And then don't let your judge come back in the room. That's your editor self, your critical, analytical person. So the creator and the editor should not be in the room at the same time. And of course, you're both of those things. So one day I would write like the creator or the employee, and the next day I would come in as the judge or the boss, the critic. But when I tried to do both at the same time, you type one paragraph and then you're analyzing it, and you just slow yourself way down.
I like that. That's a good tip. I'm going to remember that while I'm writing, because I do that myself. I'm like, okay, let's write this whole thing. And like an hour later, I'm still picking apart what I wrote before. So I just kind of want to open things up. If anybody has a question, you can put it in the chat, or feel free to unmute and ask if you have any questions for Cyd, or questions about maybe stuff you're thinking about writing your own book, or promotional things. Just ask away. Darren, do you have a question?
I'll jump in. I'd be curious to hear more. So you're going to be focusing a lot on promoting the book, or is there something new and fun on the horizon that you're thinking about as well?
Yeah, so right now I'm doing Facebook video ads about the book. They're on pause right now, but my main focus right now is to promote the course that I've built around the book, and to get people more interested in that at this point. But yeah, I do plan to market the book continually. I give away a lot of free copies too when I'm out in public. You know, I have all these books to give away, and the Facebook ads are on pause, but I need to get back to those. But by focusing on this course that I've developed, I feel that's going to get more people. Well, not only will they be following the book, you know, the course follows the book, but I think that will spur more interest overall amongst their friends and colleagues and all of that. That wasn't a very good answer, but I do look for ways to put my name out there when I can, like at local events and things.
Do you have any tips on finding some of these local events, especially now that things are starting to open back up again and we can start to do things in person?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I focus on local weight loss groups, you know, people that might be interested in my message, or local churches. The best group I ever spoke to I was invited to speak to a group of Seventh-day Adventists, because they not only do they follow scripture, but they are supposed to eat this way, you know, according to their faith. So I sold 25 books at this little small meeting. That was the most books I had sold in a small meeting at one time. So that was fortunate. Otherwise, I do cooking classes, you know, at my church, and open that up to the public if anybody wants to come and learn how to cook for diabetes, for example, or learn how to cook to fight inflammation, you know, things like that. I also teach at the local college too. They let me do Zoom meetings, but now that COVID is getting better and we're back to in person, they want me to come back in person and teach at the college. And I'm not sure if I'm going to do that yet. I loved doing it through Zoom, but I'm not sure if I'll go back in person. It just wasn't a very, they pay you like $50 no matter how many people show up, and, you know, to pack all the stuff and travel and do that whole big thing. Sometimes you got to weigh what's worth your return on investment, but it does get your name out there too. So if your local college will let you do anything, or Barnes and Noble, you know, well, that's if you have the book. Usually a park district too will let you come in and do classes. There's all sorts of things. It depends on your niche, I guess, if you're interested in different types of things. If you're a car show guy, you know, there'd be other venues, like my husband's into cars, and so there's things I would do differently, but depends on your niche.
And I like the inspiration personally to look outside of just writing itself. Now, we're all writers. It's easy to hole ourselves up with our computers, or if we're old school, or sort of, oh, well, I don't know. Am I the only digital analog? I hope not. Or the only native analog? I hope not. But sometimes I feel like I talk to other people and they're all digital natives, and I'm like, but I use paper. Either way, it's easy to hole ourselves up and not look beyond kind of our little box of writing. What else can we do? What else is related to our niche, to what we're writing about? And it might be, if like you and I, we write about health, it might be cooking classes. If you're writing about tech, it might be attending some kind of, you know, tech conference. It might even be talking about devices, or it's something that's related to what you're writing. I like that inspiration. Darren has a question. She says, now that you're published and you've got the book in hand, is there anything you wish you would have done differently?
That's a good one. Throughout the whole process, what would I have done differently? Well, I think I would have chosen a different editor, that's for sure. One good piece of advice I did get at the beginning was to trademark this name, the Plan A Diet. Trademark that, and I'm glad I did, because someone else challenged me on it the year after I did that, and I would not have gotten this title. And this book did win an award. So the award, the Book Excellence Award for 2020, this was one of the winners. So be sure, if you write something, put it out there in contests. That's a big thing. To say that you have an award-winning book gives you a lot more credibility online and with different people that you're pursuing. But I don't think I would have done too many things differently, except maybe not dawdle like I did for 4.5 years, not drag my feet. I wish I wouldn't have done that, but I see now where it all kind of fell into place. And 2018 was the year of the book for me. So maybe you'd want to give yourself a deadline too, like 2021 will be the year of this for you, to get motivated.
I like that, because then you can even dub it like the month of something. A lot of us talk about shipping essays for a month. I like that because it does kind of encapsulate what you're doing. Do we have any more questions that anyone would like to ask? Okay, well, I think I've asked everything that I'd like to ask too. It's been fantastic having you, Cyd. Thank you so much for taking the time. I am very happy that we got a chance to chat and that you were able to share both your story and your tips. And I think, I don't know, those of us who are thinking of branching out beyond something like a newsletter and into a book, I think we can take some inspiration away from this and learn to work our niches in a little bit different way too. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Sam. If I can do it, you guys can do it for sure. Thanks so much.
We're trying.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good one.